This is Justin.
And this is Haley. You're listening to The Price of Avocado Toast.
We're a married millennial couple wanting to normalize the conversations around money. We want to hear about your highs and your lows,
The do's and the don'ts on your path towards financial freedom. Hi, Toasties. Welcome to The Price of Avocado Toast, Episode 9.
Whether you're a first-time listener or you've been following us from the start of this thing, we are so glad to have this conversation with you today. You guys, I went back to work this week.
Yeah.
Distance learning teaching is stressful. I started on Thursday and just had a Zoom meeting in the morning and kind of like checked in with kids throughout the day on their technology. And then we did the same Friday, but then Friday we also handed out their materials, and it was just wild. A busy 2 days.
Yeah, but the whole week was busy because I went back to work this week too, but I haven't seen the kids yet until Tuesday. But we both experienced for the first time since really ever, both of us working at home, but also having the baby here. So that was a little bit of juggling. Also, we got a puppy this week. So that was interesting, but I think we've got it. Next week when school starts, we get into the hang of things. It'll be good.
Mm-hmm. We also had a lot of PDs this week, and so like the Zoom PDs make it harder because it's not as flexible as our teaching schedules where we can kind of set things up and work with kids one-on-one and pull them when we need to or put them on independent work or, you know, paper and pen stuff when they need. So
yeah, well, we'll get into the hang of this new normal. All of you guys working from home, yeah, we feel you, especially if you have kids.
Yeah.
And babies. Like, this is just a whole different, I don't know. I never thought I'd work from home with a baby. This is just a very strange concept. But it's weird and strange for everybody. So that's one thing that's keeping me sane. Like, I know that this is weird and it's not normal, and I'm not the only one that's struggling.
yeah.
You know?
Yeah, seriously.
And all these people that have, like, their kids at home and full-time job, and they're trying to do all of that at the same time. I just can't even imagine having school-age kids while trying to do this. So if that's you listening, we feel you completely. Last week I mentioned we were having some major tech issues. I talked about wanting to be consistent and showing up and all of that. So we got some new microphones, and I feel super cool right now, like with my headset, and I can see you, and I can see your face, and I feel like I'm not going to be saying what the whole time. But today we could not figure out some tech issues, so we called our friend Garrett, who actually is the producer, Bearcat Shark, who made the music for the intro and outro. Well, he didn't make it for us. We used his music.
Yeah.
Lift Off.
We like his stuff.
Awesome song. So thank you, Garrett. We really appreciate all the help. This whole technology stuff for us as podcasters is not quite our thing. But we're learning.
Yeah, we're the personalities. We're not quite as techy as we'd like. And Garrett's just been awesome through the whole thing. And his wife, Emily's been posting stuff on Instagram about us and pumping the podcast. And they're just awesome. So Garrett and Emily, if you guys are listening to this, we miss you. We appreciate you. We love you. You guys are great. You've been a huge blessing to us.
For sure. All right, let's jump into what we're going to talk about today. So we've really been thinking about like all the things we can talk about for podcast episodes, but we want to make this as relevant as possible, like when we're recording it. You know, I don't want to record like 5 weeks in advance and then have something crazy happen and make it seem like we're just completely, what's the word when you're just like...
Almost like being tone deaf.
Exactly.
Like
that's what I was looking for.
We don't want to post something like, hey, let's talk about how to do this or what you should be doing here when like the world is really stressful and crazy and hectic right now.
Yeah.
And it would just feel super disingenuous to do something like that.
Well, like what if we're talking about like how to become millennial millionaires and then COVID round 2 hits really hard and everyone's unemployed? That's very, very tone deaf.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm going today.
Or like, you know, an episode on like go and get 7 different side hustles while like people are closing down their businesses because things can't work anymore.
So it's very safe to say this whole entire coronavirus fiasco pandemic has been jolting for everybody. Like, I never in a million years thought that we would be here in May, and then all of a sudden it's August. And someone said the other day that it's on August 1st. They said it's August 1st of March 2020. And that's like, I just can't believe we're still here.
Yeah.
Whoa.
It's crazy.
And the end is not really anywhere in sight for like us as teachers with the online learning right now. So I really wanted to gear this episode towards like, what do we do if in the fall, during the flu season, like, you know, we're teachers, people get the flu all the time, but during like the actual flu season, if coronavirus hits like twice as hard as it did in March or April, and it keeps going up, and then the economy does a full-blown shutdown again, what are we going to do?
Yeah.
Like, we already learned our lesson about the toilet paper.
Yeah.
Because we went and bought the bidets, so we will not be without toilet paper. Or we can be without toilet paper because we got the bidets. But what will we do? Like, all these things happened, and we need to be more prepared.
Absolutely. So we felt that it was important to touch on that today and just talk about what can you do to be prepared. What are some action steps that you can take? We live in Northern California where it feels like it's fire season constantly. We just got the Nixle alerts today on our phone about like, hey, fire warning. And so, you know, we're constantly thinking of like, okay, what's the action plan if fire hits and we need to evacuate? And while that's a very time-sensitive thing, the reality of an economic shutdown happening again is relatively high. So we wanted to talk about some of the action steps that people can take to start safeguarding their families right now, because we saw how jolting it was in our community, in our state, in our country, in the world. And it's important to look ahead to those things and plan for it in case it happens.
And even if it isn't a coronavirus shutdown, you know, we're recording this in August of 2020. If that doesn't happen again, this episode can totally be used as preparing yourself for the next recession, because the economy goes up and down, and it's bound to go way far back down. It happens. Mm-hmm. But, you know, whether or not we have another full-blown, like, economic shutdown where everyone's closed for what we thought was 2 weeks but turned into several months, we need to be prepared. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Really just how to prepare yourself for either that next wave of coronavirus with a shutdown or just a recession in general. We looked up some stats on unemployment because I knew a lot of people were unemployed. You know, I mentioned in episode 2 that I actually lost my job, my teaching contract in February. So I was collecting unemployment also, but that actually had nothing to do with COVID. Like, as of August 6th, there were 32.1 million Americans collecting unemployment. And not all of those are COVID related. However, that's a huge number.
Mm-hmm. Massive number.
I mean, I can sit here right now off the top of my head and name probably 20 people that I know personally that are collecting unemployment. It has become, I mean, the safeguard really the only thing that people know how to do because they didn't prepare themselves for this situation. I know I sure as hell didn't think I was going to lose my teaching job, even though that had nothing to do with the virus. But imagine working for a small business and then all of a sudden it's closed and everything else is closed. You can't go get some side job like you just said.
Yeah.
So what do we do?
Yeah, you're thrust into a really unfortunate circumstance and you can't always prepare for those things, but we want to talk about potentially preparing for that. 32 million people collecting unemployment just shows you that right now our country's struggling. People are financially struggling, and
totally.
We want to do our best to help people begin to think about those action steps because sometimes you don't always think about it. And a lot of people out there listening are going to know probably some of the steps that we're going to say. They might be listening right now thinking, oh, okay, cool. I know what you're going to say. You're going to say X, Y, and Z. And if that's you thinking this, then awesome. You're ahead of the game, and you already know the action steps. So make sure you're doing them. But if there's somebody out there who doesn't quite know how they can best prepare themselves, then please stick around for this episode because it's so important.
I love what you just said about, like, knowing how to do it, but actually doing it.
Yeah.
And that means holding yourself accountable. Like, really take everything we've put in the past 8 episodes into action and go forward and pay off debt and do those things, so you are in a situation where you're like, okay, I know what to do. I am as ready as I can be.
Yeah.
So what's the first thing people do?
First step has got to be to pay down your debt. You know, we've had the conversations about whether or not somebody wants to use credit cards, and we just simply can't preach on that. I'm not going to support somebody saying that they're going to be using credit cards for any type of financial benefit. Whatever you choose to do in your household is up to you. But if you're going to be following the action plans that I'm suggesting, is pay off debt. You know, the Ramsey team says the fastest wealth building tool is your income. When we paid off our debts, when we got all of our debts taken care of, it was insane how much more of our monthly income we started to see again. It was crazy. It was like we just got a raise every single month.
I mean, there was money in the bank account.
Yeah.
Instead of like paid on the first of the month and then it was just gone.
Every single month was like a new bonus check because we weren't paying the $800 to $1,000 that we mentioned last episode that we were paying on ridiculous debts. So the first step has got to be pay off your debts. Listen to episode 8. Attack it. Either the debt avalanche or the debt snowball, whatever you prefer. But start attacking your debts now. Planning ahead for the next thing that happens, the next recession or the next wave of an economic shutdown. Because if you can get those debts out of the way, you're already sitting better than most. So many Americans are living with debt, and if they can just get those out of their way, if they don't owe those payments to other people, then they are going to be starting off on the right foot.
And it's not an all or nothing thing. I think so many people think like, well, I have a Macy's credit card for $500. Why can't I use my American Express card? Like, I already have debt. Well, that's not the way that it works. $500 of debt is significantly better than $10,000 worth of debt. So you have to make the choice to not continue to go into debt first, and then start to pay off the debt. And that's just extremely important. And until you're ready until you are ready to do that, you're not going to be in a position where you're able to really safeguard yourself and your finances for something like another economic shutdown. That's huge.
It's massive. And people have, reached out to us about like, hey, I'm upside down on this car. And we've given them some advice on like, hey, sell the car, take out a personal loan to cover the back end cost that you're upside down, because a $3,000 debt is better than a $27,000 debt. And so while, we're doing our best to get out of debt, like you just said, a $500 debt is much better than a $10,000 debt. So you've got to commit to debt not being in the equation for you anymore moving forward. And then you can start attacking that debt and paying it off.
After you've paid off debt, the next thing you need to do is have an emergency fund of some sort. We recommend starting with $1,000, but that is most definitely not going to get you very far in a situation where you have a pandemic and you lost your job. That, for most people, is probably half of their mortgage. If that's your whole mortgage, I'm jealous.
Yeah.
We're going to get to in a second what happens like when all of this goes down, but this is really along the lines of preparing yourself first. So first you need to pay off debt and then have an emergency fund, like boost the emergency fund. After you've paid off debt, then start putting more money in it than just $1,000. So then you're putting everything extra into it so you have more money. Ideally, 3 to 6 months to kind of go off of.
And there's tons of ways that you can get into that emergency fund, or I should say pay into that emergency fund. We've been selling things like crazy on Facebook. I sold 2 air pumps that we got, I think, as like wedding gifts in like random camping gear. Sold them each for $5 last week. We had 2 other extras that we have.
We had like
4
air
or
pumps.
5 air pumps, like totally unnecessary. But I sold 2 and made $10. I sold some of the clothes that I wanted you to clean out of your closet anyways. We sold, other random knickknacks around the house, and it just starts to add up. It just starts to add up and add up and add up. And so find ways that you can fund that emergency fund without having to tap into your monthly income. If you can say, hey, instead of taking money out of my paychecks to get into my emergency fund, I'm going to sell like a maniac for the next 2 weeks, and I'm going to try and hit $1,000 to get my emergency fund. Awesome. That's great because we're decluttering and we're not tapping into our income. And you and I have spoken, and the tool that you use when you're unsure about wanting to sell something is a 3-pronged test, right? The first thing is you look at the item and you say, when was the last time I actually used this? Have I used this truly within the last month?
And you literally would look at me and be like, you need to clean out your closet. When was the last time you wore any of these clothes? And I'm sitting there like, well, I just had a baby. Like, none of these clothes fit. They're just sitting there. And then finally I was like, okay, literally, they do not fit. I got to get rid of them.
Yeah.
So we got rid of some.
Well, I appreciate you doing that because I was getting tired of looking at it. So,
You're welcome.
yeah. Prong 1 is how much am I actually using this stuff. Prong 2 is on a scale of 1 to 10, how much value is this item truly adding to my life? If I've used it in the last month, but the value that I add on a scale of 1 to 10 is like a 2, it's probably not that important to me. I'm just using it maybe because it's available, or I'm wearing this shirt because it's clean. Who knows, right? Mm-hmm. But just check the value. If it's anything that's above a 6, I think you can start to kind of say, well, maybe I'll just keep it. The third prong is, if I were to price this item, what would I price it at? And if that amount of money was in the middle of my dining room table and I didn't have this item, would I go buy that item with this money? For example, I had excess air pumps, so I didn't need to buy another excess air pump. If I had $5 in the middle of my table, would I go spend it on a third air pump? No. So I sold it and got rid of it, right? And you can do that with other things. I sold an iPad. Mm-hmm. Right? And so I wasn't using my iPad because I had other modes of technology, and I thought I could price it out at like $125. And I said, if I had $125 in the middle of my dining room table, would I go buy an iPad? And it was like, no, I would put this in an emergency fund. Okay, cool. So I sold it that day, and it made sense, and it funded our emergency fund, which we obviously still have. We haven't had to use it, which is great, but nonetheless, that's the 3-pronged test. And Facebook, Craigslist, all those sites can be a really good way to fund your emergency fund without having to tap into your monthly income.
I have found that when you are trying to pay off debt and you're working the debt snowball, that the third prong, it's always a no.
Yeah.
No, I would not go buy this.
Yep.
Because the mindset has changed, and I'm now in the mindset where I'm just trying to pay things off as fast as possible and stack cash as fast as possible to pay things off. So no, I definitely would not go buy an iPad. Therefore, it's gone. Yep. We sell it. No, I definitely would not go buy new dishes. So they're gone. Stuff like that. And so I think it really, if you're in the right mindset, you can really sell close to anything in your house.
I agree. Yeah, it's a mindset shift.
And we really have sold some interesting, strange things, but you'd be surprised what people would pay for. Your crap. People will buy.
One man's trash is another man's
crap.
treasure.
For
Absolutely.
sure. So the next thing you need to do, first you are paying down debt. Then you are boosting your emergency fund beyond $1,000. You're adding more and more and more money until you have ideally 3 to 6 months of a emergency fund. I don't even want to say buffer because this is not money that you tap into ever unless it is an absolute emergency.
Which another economic shutdown you could totally classify as that is. Yeah.
Oh, 100%. But then the next thing is to have contingency plans for certain situations. So what would happen when you lose your job? Mm-hmm. And you might think, I would never lose my job. I have job security. Yeah, well, I thought that too, and I lost my teaching job. Again, unrelated to the COVID situation, but it still happened. And we did not have that conversation. We did not have a conversation about what happens when one of us loses our teaching job, because it just wasn't going to happen in our heads, but it did. So you really have to walk through that scenario with yourself, and if you are married, with your partner, and figure out what are you guys going to do, because when shit hits the fan, you have to have a plan B and a plan C.
And the bills don't stop.
Oh, no. They definitely do not stop. And another thing, since this is a global pandemic, really walk through what the heck are you going to do when I say when or if you or your partner or someone in your family, if you have children, gets very sick. And now this doesn't have to be a positive COVID test. It could just be getting super sick in general. Like you can walk through these situations. It doesn't have to be a global pandemic to walk through these situations. But what are you going to do if that happens? You have to walk through it.
I think also if somebody's an hourly employee and they get really sick, you miss 3 weeks of work, you're talking about a whole month's income that your family's losing. And that's huge. You've got to have those plans in place, and you've got to talk about them. And it may be difficult, but if it's, hey, if something were to happen, what do we do? I don't know. Maybe I'm signed up with Uber and I start driving again, or maybe I'm doing this or doing that. You've got to have those plans. You've got to talk about those things. It's all about being prepared for when things don't go right, because, welcome to life. Things aren't always going to go right.
Yeah, and it seems kind of morbid, but you and I just had conversations a few weeks ago when we got life insurance. Mm-hmm. Like, what do we do if you die? What do we do if I die? What do we do if both of us dies? Like, we have to, if both of us die, there we go.
Yeah.
I'm a teacher here, screwing up my grammar. But, like, we have to have plans, and you don't want to talk about these things. I do not want to sit here and even think about you being gone.
Yeah.
But the fact that we've thought through the plans and we've made plans, if God forbid something horrible happens, we are now somewhat prepared. Mm-hmm. Way more than we were before all of that.
Beforehand, absolutely.
And the most important last step really is to live below your means. Now, that goes back to a couple episodes ago when we talked about budgeting and the 4 walls. So living below your means, what are your absolute bare minimum expenses? And you want to go over the 4 walls again?
Yeah, 4 walls. You've got your housing. So whether you're in a mortgage or a rental opportunity, you've got to take care of housing. You got to take care of food. So we're probably going to be slashing our grocery budget or getting ready to slash our grocery budget. Going to be living well below our means. You're looking at transportation. So you got vehicle, insurance, gas, and then you're looking at utilities. And again, start thinking about slashing some of those. Do you really need Netflix, Hulu, Amazon Prime, Peacock, all that stuff? Really start thinking about how you can cut down on some utilities.
And you can save a lot of money if you save on those subscriptions, for sure.
You can.
So all of that was preparing you for a situation before it happens. Now I'm going to review those again. It is paying off debt, boosting your emergency fund beyond the $1,000, discussing contingency plans for what if blank happens, and living significantly below your means. Now we're going to get into what to actually do when life does not go according to plan and when the unexpected happens.
So you've started to prepare for the next wave or the next shutdown or the recession, and our hope is that you're as close to being out of debt as possible. Again, that $500 debt, way better than that $10,000 debt, way better than that $50,000 debt, et cetera, et cetera. The closer you are to being out of debt, the better opportunity you're going to have to maximize your income and be comfortable when things don't go great. So if something happens and you lose your job, let's look at it in that realm. We're going to treat it as though you've lost your job, whether that is through an economic shutdown or through being sick. First thing you need to do, this is obvious, but we just want to stress this, please file for unemployment ASAP. You have paid into this. If you have been working for a while, this is something that you have supported. This is not like you are being irresponsible and living off, other people's hard work. If you've lost your job, you need to go file for unemployment immediately. I want to stress to people, depending what happened, it might be emotionally difficult for you in that moment. And I don't want to sidetrack that or negate however anyone's feeling. But the simple fact of the matter is you've got to start to take care of business as fast as possible. You don't have a day to wait. You don't have 2 days to wait, because as we saw with the COVID-19 shutdown, unemployment got backed up fast. Unemployment issues happened quick, and the system was not functioning great. And you do not want to get caught in that cycle. So grieve how you need to grieve for losing your position. take care of your emotional state, but you have got to get started on your action plan immediately. And the first thing you should do, file for unemployment. Go down to the EDD office and take care of that stuff. Start calling people. Ask to talk to live humans. Be kind. Show them grace because you're hoping grace from them. But that's just got to be the first thing you do.
And I actually, when I filed for unemployment for losing my teaching job, I didn't go to the EDD office or talk to anybody on the phone. I did the entire thing online. So that is an option too. There are many different ways to get it done. And I have heard through the grapevine that calling is like the worst right now. They are not, you can't get a hold of someone to discuss the claim. So that should probably be the last one on your list. So after filing for unemployment, that's the absolute first thing you need to do. The second thing is to stop paying on all of your debts except for the minimums. Now, you do not just stop paying them. If you stop paying them, that's going to be a much bigger problem than the one that you're in. You're going to stop paying the debt snowball or the debt avalanche. That means if your minimum is $20, that's all you're going to pay. It doesn't matter if it's a $5,000 debt. The hope is the length of time that you're in this crisis, that it's not that long. You know, even if it's 6 months, the interest that's accrued on all of your debts is not going to be any more overwhelming than it already is. Being in debt is overwhelming to begin with, but the interest that's accrued is not going to ruin you. You know, you're already in debt. That's the way I look at it. So you file for unemployment. You stop the snowball or avalanche, whatever you're doing. Only pay minimums. And then what do?
Anything that you were attributing to the avalanche or your snowball method that was additional or extra immediately goes into savings. We're earmarking that money for savings as fast as possible in our budget. We're putting it in the bank. If it's a cash thing that you're doing because you're getting paid cash in some realm, we're stashing that away as fast as possible. We are earmarking that for savings immediately.
And we've said this over and over, but we follow the Dave Ramsey plan. And he references this as being in storm mode. But also, if you are having a baby, this is also referred to as stork mode. Same thing. You are stopping all the payments on your debts except for the minimums, and then everything else, you're just stashing. So you're not taking that money and putting it on debt. You're just keeping it and letting it grow and grow and grow, which is why you and I had so much money to just throw on our loans 2 weeks ago when we put the $4,000 on the loans. It's because when COVID-19 happened, first off, we were kind of in stork mode from the baby. So that happened. Well, didn't happen. Happily happened. We had our baby, and then the virus happened. And so it was like stork mode on top of storm mode. And so we kind of stopped paying the debts except for the minimums. And then we had all this money just kind of growing. And then all of a sudden, it's like you look in your bank account and you have a lot of money. And it makes you really feel so much better in a situation where you're not freaking out.
Absolutely.
I really felt much better.
Yeah, 1,000%. And the cool thing is, too, if you're able to get through the shutdown or the issue relatively undamaged, then that money that you saved up can then go back to your debt payoff method.
Exactly.
Or to whatever you're working on, your emergency fund or some type of retirement or college savings or paying on your house, whatever it might have been, you can then put it in there. But for the time being, we're not going to get rid of that. We're gonna hoard cash. We're gonna act like, the leprechaun that's just stashing coins.
So what do we do next?
This is one that I think is really important for people to hear because I don't know if people know about this quite as much. But I would say start calling your utility companies and see if they have resources for you. See if there are options that they will provide for you in times of crisis. Call your electric and gas company and see if they can give you some type of rebate or some type of support, whether you're low income or maybe they've got some kind of opportunities for you to save a little bit on your bill. I'm imagining, phone services and internet services aren't going to be like that, but call your city. See if the water can be taken care of maybe for even just a month or two. our water bill was up to like $140. They take care of that for a month or two. That's $300. That $300 can go a long way in a crisis when you're really slashing your budget. So call those utility companies, see what they'll do, see if they'll help you at all. And they might also help you or guide you into some other resources. Even if it's not with them, they might say, hey, you know what? Unfortunately, we don't have any programs like that, but I do know of this social program that's in the city that will help you with some groceries, or it'll help you get onto housing and urban development list for some low-income housing, or whatever it may be. So just reach out to resources. Don't think you have to do it all on your own.
And the situations we're talking about, global pandemic or a recession, those are times when you need to, I know it's hard, but everyone is struggling. Mm-hmm. It's not a time to sit there and wallow in your shame.
Yeah.
Because not everybody, I mean, there are still people with money who've done things the right way. But there are so many people in the same boat.
Yeah.
And, I am not ashamed to sit here and say that I collected unemployment for 4 months.
No, gosh, no.
I mean, I lost my job. I was entitled to that. It is what it is.
You were working since you were 16.
Exactly. I've been putting into that for a very long time. But in a situation like a round 2 of COVID, if this happens to you, don't be ashamed to call your companies and see if they can negotiate with you. They might be able to even, pause it for a few months, and then you can do a payment plan for the months that you were paused or whatever. I don't know if that's an option, but it could be.
Yeah.
You don't know unless you ask.
Exactly. And everybody's going through it. So give yourself some grace and reach out for support, reach out for help. And you'd be surprised, I think, at what your community will try and help you through. We see, obviously, this stuff on Facebook. People post the GoFundMes and everything, and it's so hard because we just want to give constantly. But if you're asking for things and putting it out there, people might be able to share it or get you connected with other resources. So don't have shame or guilt around that. That's awesome.
Now, in a complete recession or a global pandemic, this is an absolute last resort type of situation. But if you are in a situation where you're freaking out, you do not know how you're going to pay your mortgage, you do not know how you're going to pay your bills, you don't know how your car payment's going to get paid, therefore you're terrified it's going to get repossessed in the middle of the night. If that's what you're living, you have to ask for help. So the very, very last thing, the first thing, file for unemployment. Second thing, stop the debt payoff and only pay the minimums. The third is to take any of that extra money and put it into savings. And then make sure you call whatever your utility companies are, and see if they have some resources for you. And then the very last thing, and I say last resort, if you are in this situation, is to call your mortgage company or if you're renting, call your landlord and see if they can negotiate with you. But if you own a home, call your mortgage company and discuss your options for mortgage forbearance. Now, I'm saying last resort because what's your option? To lose your home?
Yeah.
It's either foreclosure or not. So that's really, if you're in the situation where you're about to lose everything, there are options. You can call your mortgage company and ask about mortgage forbearance. Now, you have to be very, very careful if you do this because a lot of companies will kind of ask that you get on a repayment plan, maybe that you can't necessarily afford. So some of the words are balloon repayment. That's also known as a reinstatement plan or a lump sum plan. So a balloon repayment, reinstatement plan, or a lump sum payment plan, all of those are really not a good idea. That means that, say you are under mortgage forbearance for 5 months. When it's over, you will owe all 5 of those months at the exact same time. So if you just lost your job, you don't have income coming in except for your unemployment, which probably isn't 100% of your income. Therefore, how the heck are you going to come up with 5 months worth of a mortgage at the same time?
Yeah.
It's setting you up for failure.
Yeah. You're probably going to get a loan at your credit union. You're having to go into some debt.
I mean, it's really not a good option. So you really want to shy away from that if at all possible. Mm-hmm. So you want to request a payment referral modification. Basically, that just means that if you are on the mortgage forbearance for 5 months, those 5 months will be added to the end of whatever you owe left. So for example, if you have a 15-year mortgage left, then it will turn into a 15 years, 5 months left. It'll just go towards the end. So instead of, paying it all at once, it gets put towards the end. Now, there are other repayment options. You can get set up for a payment plan for those 5 months and pay it over a year or something like that. But you really need to talk to them and know what you are signing up for. Do not call your mortgage company frantic, because you're probably frantic, but do not call them and then agree to something that you do not understand, because that's when you get in trouble, and then you set yourself up to short sale or foreclose anyway. So it really just is not a good idea if you can avoid it.
Yeah, you got to steer clear from that stuff. And like you said, don't get into something that you don't understand.
That's the biggest thing. You have to know what you're doing.
Yeah, and foreclosure on your home takes a while. It's not like,
Yeah.
they're just going to boot you out immediately. So you have time to sit with your partner, sit with your family, sit with a trusted friend who's, good with their finances and say, hey, is this an option for me? Is this the right move? You've got time. So take time. Don't just think they're going to show up the next day with the local sheriffs and throw you out on the street.
No, and it's also a common misconception that just because you default on something, whether that is your mortgage or another debt that you have, a car payment or something, just because you default once does not mean that it's over and they're just going to come take it. You can work it out. You can call them and say, like, I am under hardship. I lost my job. I need to figure out a plan to fix this, and then get back on track. The mortgage forbearance will not be the best for your credit, but it's significantly better than foreclosing on your home. So you kind of have to weigh the pros and cons if you're put into that situation. If you don't have an emergency fund and you have no money and you're drowning in debt and you're about to lose your home, then you really have to weigh the options, because the other option is that they come and you are on the streets. So we really have to kind of look at everything before you make any big decisions.
And get ahead of it, right? Rather than sit and default on it if at all possible. Because we know whether or not we're going to make that payment. We typically know, hey, I don't have the money in my bank account to clear that. Don't just sit with those feelings, right? Don't just sit with that worry. Call them. Call them and start talking. Get a live human on the phone that might be willing to show you some support or some grace and help you through this time. Because, again, a lot of people are probably going through it. There might be some type of system that they've set up. There might be an option for you to work around. But if you just sit and let it pass for 3 months and you've never reached out to anybody to figure out what you can do, well, things aren't going to go as you probably would hope.
Then they're not willing to really compromise with you as much at all.
Exactly. But if you get ahead of it, much like chatting with your utility resources, you're probably going to be in a little bit better shape.
And if you paid attention, we didn't ever once say to go into debt when you're in a situation like this. So really try to do everything possible to not have that be what you need to do. Now, if you literally have nothing left and you lost your job and you have no idea what to do next, you're about to get kicked out. You can go to your bank and get a personal loan and figure out what to do next. There's no shame in that if you are in that situation. But we are not sitting here encouraging people to go deeper into debt ever. But when you're in a situation like a global pandemic, sometimes life happens and you really have to figure it out. And if that's where you are and you need to figure that out, you can message us on Instagram and we will chat you through potential options. But no one is sitting here shaming you if that's where you are.
Yeah, and if that's something that happens for you, we'll help you walk through it the best we can. And we'll help you come out on the other side as non-beat up as possible through it all, because it's gonna be difficult and you're going through hell. And I'm not going to sit here and pretend to know how people are feeling when they're going through that, but we'll certainly be there to support them.
Especially if you have 3 or 4 kids, or if you're a single parent. There are many situations and scenarios that we can walk through, but we don't know how you're living your life.
All right, you guys, so let's recap the steps to prepare for the next recession. Number 1, pay down debt. Get that debt out of your life as fast as possible. The less debt, the better opportunity you're going to be able to maximize your income. Step number 2, boost that emergency fund. $1,000 is not enough of an emergency fund. You need to have more, but you've got to take care of those debts first before you do that. Follow those action steps. Number 3, talk with your partner, talk with your spouse, talk to a trusted family friend, and get contingency plans in place. What happens if? What do we do if? Make sure that you know what you're going to do. And step 4, live below your means. You've got to be maximizing your income by not overspending each month. That's the best way that you can prepare for the next wave or the next recession. And then what happens when it actually hits? So you followed those steps and it actually shows up, and now we've got to go into crisis mode. Number 1, file for unemployment ASAP. Do not waste time on this. Take care of that immediately. Number 2, stop your debt payoff. You've already done all this work leading up to it. Bravo, we're so proud of you. Now is not the time anymore. We're going to pause that and only pay minimums on our debt that we have left. If it's $20, you are only paying $20. You're not paying $21. You're not paying $30. No, $20. Every dollar counts. Number 3, take the extra money that you were paying onto your debt avalanche or your debt snowball and put it into storm mode. We are tucking every single extra cent into the cellar, and we are not touching it until it's needed. We are stockpiling cash. We are going into crisis mode here. Number 4, call utility companies, call social resources, and see who can help you. Advocate, advocate, advocate. Call your family, call your friends that you know might have used those resources in the past. Hey, can you point me in the direction? Hey, do you know what I can do for this? Call your resources and advocate for yourself. And the last step, if needed, reach out to your housing situation and see what they can work with you on for your monthly housing payment. Whether that's a mortgage plan to tack it onto the back end of the loan, whether that's talking to the rental company and seeing if they have a plan that you can use. That's our last resort, though. We do not want to have an issue where we end up out of shelter, because that's dangerous, that's scary, and we don't want that for you. Again, like Haley mentioned, none of those action steps talk about you going deeper into debt. We don't want to support that for you. We want to make sure we take care of the action steps ahead of time so that we are as out of debt as possible. But if you're somebody that's struggling right now and you need some support, you need some guidance, you're worried about things, please reach out to us. Please, please, please reach out to us. We will help you in any way that we can.
I really want to make sure that these episodes are catered to what you guys want to hear. So please, please, please reach out to us on Instagram. Let us know what you think about this episode. Give us some feedback. Let us know if you have suggestions for future episodes. You can go to our link in the bio on Instagram, which is at the price of avocado toast. I got rid of all the extra period. Make it a little easier for you. But go to the link in the bio, and there's a little Google survey thing, and you can input there any ideas you have or suggestions, and we are looking at those, and we want to give you what you want to hear. So please give us any and all feedback you have. We are so happy to have you here listening and supporting us on our journey.
Absolutely. That's going to be a wrap on this episode of The Price of Avocado Toast. As always, we are so thankful you were here to listen to this, and we're so proud to be a part of this community with you guys. Happy budgeting.
You've got this, Toasties.
If you're interested in speaking more with a financial coach, hit up our coach Ryan at MeFinanciallyFree on Instagram. Use the promo code HELP50 in the consultation notes section to receive 50% off.
Thank you for listening to The Price of Avocado Toast. Be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. If you vibed with this episode, we would love it if you shared it on your social media and tagged us so we can say thanks.